All right, so welcome back. The next thing that we're going to be taking a look at is the room controls. We need to establish some control over the lights, the shades, but first we're going to take a look at the HID conferencing aspect of this room. This is a conference room after all, so we want to give them some sort of controls over those calls that may be coming in. And so we'll jump into our schematic. We already have the HID conferencing component here in our design. This has already been set up for us. It's connected to a call sync that is then connected to our NMT1.
What is call sync, you might ask? Call sync is this component within Q-SYS that allows you to automate certain parts of your call and all of the associated LEDs that come along with it. So for example, if you wanted to mute the call, you could also automatically have the LED on the NL series soundbar turn colors, and it will automatically mitigate the same thing on the microphone. And so, it's going to automate those responses so that you don't have to do them manually.
And its inputs is coming from the HID conferencing component. So it's kind of looking across the USB cable at the PC to whichever conferencing application is running, whether that's, again, Teams or Google or Zoom or whatever it is. It's looking at that application to know if you are in a mute state, to know if you are in an active session, and it can use that information to then spread out to all of those various devices and change their LEDs, et cetera.
Now, the HID conferencing component is going to give us the ability to connect to the call accept or call decline of most of your average conferencing applications, as well as give us a few other controls. If we take a look, there's our accept, our decline, our phone mute, and then we have a few LEDs for the off hook, mute, ring, and connected. We're actually going to be using some of the connections from those LEDs to establish the visibility of the layer that's going to hold these controls.
But before you add those controls, think about which controls do you want to give them? Which are applicable for them in that moment? You don't want to flood people with too many controls. That's going to end up confusing them. We give this quote in our training a lot from author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, where the quote, and I'm going to paraphrase this, I'm sorry, is that true perfection when it comes to design is not found when there is nothing else that you can add, but when there is nothing else that you can remove. You want to pare down your UCI, give them all the functionality that they are looking for, that they need, but don't give them more than that. That's just going to confuse them, right? So on this UCI, when the phone is ringing, don't just grab everything from the HID conferencing component and shove it on the UCI. They don't need all those buttons. When the phone's ringing, what do they need? They need to know if they need to answer it or not. So they need the call accept and the call decline. They don't need a mute button at that point. They don't need all those LEDs that indicate things. Once they have answered the call, they don't need that phone accept button anymore, right? That is meaningless. They do still need the phone decline because that acts as a way to hang up the call, but now they need the mute button. So we're going to do two layers here, right? One when it's ringing, because that has a different set of controls that is useful to the user at the time. A different set of controls for when they're in a session, because those are different sets of controls. They don't necessarily overlap. The point is, be intentional. Think about what the user needs. Don't give them more than that, and make your decisions, with what's the word? Minimalism in mind, I think.
I feel like Antoine could have just said less is more, and he could have gotten there.
He wouldn't have said that because he's French. He would have said le plus est non bon.
Now, I will need two layers in this case. One that will give me visibility over the call accept button when a call is coming in, and then another layer that will give me the ability to control the call decline and the mute when they're actually on the call. So I'll create two new layers. This first one I'm going to call call incoming. The second one I'll call active. Now you can set this up however you like. Maybe you want these controls to really pop up in the middle of the screen, or you want them to kind of take up a big portion of the left or the right. I'm actually just going to try using this portion down here in the bottom. So I will set it apart again using something simple like a group box. I want to make it stand out though, so let's make it a pretty solid blue. I actually made a mistake here. I put the group box on the main layer. I don't want that. If you ever do something like that, it's actually really easy to correct your mistake. I don't need to delete it and then put it on the right layer or something like that. If you ever find a control or any kind of asset that's on the wrong layer and you want it somewhere else, just grab it, drag it to the layer you want it on. So I'm going to put this on the call incoming, and you can see now it's not there. And if I hit that, there it is. It's in the right layer now. Perfect. Now I will grab the control, call accept, and I will throw it on here. Whoosh. Boom. And of course, we have a class, call accept. It's right there at the top. Perfect. I will give myself a text block. Call incoming. And I'll make sure that's pretty big. It's basic, but it's going to get the job done right now. Okay, so that's going to be that layer. We need to do the layer for the actual active call that's going to have the decline and mute. So I'm just going to copy that group box and paste it on my other layer. I will hit Control V, connect to the cursor, and I will make sure it's pasting in place exactly where the other one was. And I will do the same with the text box. And then I'll just change what that says, call active. And I'll put on the appropriate controls, call decline and phone mute. And the class, call decline, and speaker mute. All right. So now that we have built the layers, we want to make sure we establish the control over the layer and have them visible only when appropriate. In that case, we're going to be pulling from the call sync right here. There's a ringing state and an off hook state. So we want to use, in this case for our first layer, we want the ringing state, right? The call is coming in and we can hit call accept because that layer pops up. So I am going to replace this tag that is currently here and use the emulators tag, incoming call 2. And then I will come over here. I'm going to pull this guy up here a little bit because I'm going to make it longer now. I'm going to expose the call active layer and the call incoming layer, my 2 new layers. And I'm going to send the incoming call from. Perfect. Because we're already here, let's go ahead and establish the same control for our active call. In this case, I don't have anything on the emulator for that, so I'm actually going to create some sort of test button so I can still make sure that it's working right. I'll do that using a custom control. I'll bring that over here, and I'll just make it a toggle button so I can toggle it on and off. I'll put the I'm in a call right there, and then I will send this through to my layer call active.
Now, what he's doing there is actually brilliant. You should all do this all the time. If you are ever bringing in something from a third-party device or something that you can't test and validate while you're building the design, you've got a true-false coming in, but you can't fake that, you can fake it. You should fake it. That toggle button he's putting in line along with that incoming stream is a button that you can use to fake what it would be like if that control was on or was off. And what's so great about it is that when the actual device is connected, that device is upstream, right? So when that device does turn on, it will override whatever your momentary testing button happens to be set at. So it doesn't hurt your design to have that in there at all, but it helps you so much in the commissioning stage because you can fake the feedback with that button. Okay, sorry, what were you doing?
I've been using the fade for a lot of my layers. In this case, I think I actually want to have it kind of slide in so that they can really see the movement of the layer. It draws their eye to it. So I'll have it slide in from the bottom for both. I think that might look all right. Now I want to test it, make sure that everything's working correctly. So let's jump back into our UCIs. Let me split the screen here. All right, the lights are on the room. Here's the incoming call button. If I press that, and there it is. Call incoming slides up from the bottom. They can answer the call if they need to. Perfect. I want to make sure, though, that the other option is working as well. If the call is active, if I press this button, there it is. That comes up as well too, so we know that that logic is working, and so now both layers will show up when they need to.
Now, I am going to call you out on this one, Jacob. Obviously, we're doing this kind of fast and dirty for the sake of filming this. We don't want you sitting watching Jacob in many minutes of silence as he carefully crafts every single button. But this is a good example of how, if you do go fast, sometimes you can make some mistakes. Like in your UCI right now, that accept and decline button that you have are kind of long and shaped like a pill. Right? And the icon is left justified on the far left side of that pill, which to me, if I'm a user, I think that I then need to slide the button horizontally, and that's not the behavior of this. So sometimes you can accidentally trick people by having your UCI designed in a way that is not intuitive. Also, you forgot to put on the call reject option, or the call decline on the ringing state. Right now, you only have the call accept button. So what does that mean? That means that when they're getting a call, you can't decline it, and everyone in the room is just sitting there like, what do we do? We don't want to answer. I hope they go away. Like when you're like a kid and there's a stranger knocking on the door, and you're like, if I just stay silent, hopefully they'll vanish eventually. Don't do that. Don't do that to your users. So the moral, I'm not ragging on you. The moral is that everyone can make mistakes. We make mistakes too. When you're making a UCI, don't rely on just yourself. Test it. Ask your colleagues to look at it. Ask them to work with it. See if it matches their intuition as well. Field testing that internally is the best way to find out whether or not you've built something that is not necessarily the most intuitive thing that you may have thought it was.